Hello, welcome to the Peaceful Wood Turner. You don't see a whole lot here, but that's actually the point because this is the project. I've put up a bunch of videos, as you know, and one of the pieces of feedback I've gotten is that it really would be better if I had some kind of sled to use on the table saw. So I decided to make myself a sled. I've watched a number of videos, I've looked at some of the plans that exist. I'm going to start with making a simple sled, and once I get this down and I know that I have this kind of right, then the next thing I'll do is I'm going to make myself a wedgie sled so that I can do the segmented turning. Because I'm really bad at the math, and the wedgie sled looks like a really good way to do it. I'll just have to get myself some wedges to put in it so that I can get everything the right size. So I have this piece of MDF. It's actually left over from when I made my workbench here, and it's a little heavier than a lot of people go with. People usually go with like a 1/2 inch. This is a 3/4 inch, but it's a piece I have sitting around, and it's actually a little bit bigger than the bed of my table saw as it is, so I think it's going to work really well. What I'm going to need to do is just trim it down a little bit, just so that I can put in a stop so I can make sure it's not going to go too far. And then I'm going to have to do all my measuring, get everything nice and straight and true so that I have a nice straight line going through the whole thing. So let me start by just squaring it up a bit. So I've watched a lot of videos on how to do this. I've read some stuff. The one problem that I've run into is that everything talks about being able to cut something like a strip that's going to go in here, and it's really great if you have a really well set up table saw that doesn't skew at all. This one's a little lightweight, and when I start doing the close measurements, I often get a little bit of wiggle in my fence. That's something that I need to look into and work on. But what I had to do instead to try to get this straight is I actually used a piece of MDF to set up my fence, just so that I could have something a little bit more straight and accurate. So I cut this piece of wood down, and it fits really nicely right in here. It's going to act as my runner. Now, this is not the right kind of wood for this. It's not the best wood for this. This will work really well for the time being. And like I said, this is my first sled. It's basically just getting the kinks out and figuring out how to do it. So next time I do it, I'm going to use more of a hardwood. This is basically just a piece of shelf wood. It's got a really nice tight grain, and it's a nicely stacked grain. So I think it's going to hold up for a little while and do a pretty good job. I cut it so that it is just a little shy. It actually goes into the groove a little bit. That way it'll float through freely. But in order to glue it to my piece, I need to shim it up. So I have some pieces of just cardboard type stuff, and I measured it out a little bit. With these folded over, it rides just above the top, which is pretty much perfect for what I want to do. And then what I'm going to do is I'm just going to set this piece, the MDF, I'm just going to set this on it right here in the saw and let the glue set. And once that sets, then I'll be able to reinforce with some screws and get it in there nicely. So I've looked at my sizing, and I want to have it basically sitting so that it's going to ride further over to the one side and just give me a little bit of overlap on the other side, about 6 inches or so. That way I can have a lot of room to support my work, and I still have room to support the cutoff, and I can also work with smaller pieces and everything else, because I'm not really doing a whole lot of big stuff. So what I'm going to do now is put some glue right on here, and I'm going to have to make sure after I do this that I go over and just clean my table saw really, really well. I don't want this glue to get in the way of anything. Just spreading it out a little bit. And I have some marks to line up. Going to need to move you a little bit. And that looks just about right. The real key is for everything to be square to the blade and to the guide. So once this sets, I'll be able to trim stuff a little bit, and I'll be able to put on my fence. So now it's a waiting game. It's been sitting for a while with a lot of weight on it. Alton Brown says the fire extinguisher is a unitasker. It is not. So let's see how it looks. I'll take it up carefully, just in case there's any issue. Everything looks really nice. I'm just going to take my little spacers out here. Set them aside. So now I'm just going to put a couple of screws in here. I'm going to put in 4 just so that I have them nicely spaced and it's going to be nice and tight and strong. And I've got my drill set up. I'm putting in some small screws. They're only 3/4 of an inch and they're number 4s. So I've got my 1/16 bit and I've got it marked out so that I won't go too deep. So I'm just going to start at the end. Got my screws, got my countersink ready to go. Just going to make a small countersink. Before I go any further, I'm just going to double check and make sure that I didn't create any problems for myself. I'm just going to slide that through, and then I'll flip it back over and sand it. Nice. Okay, I'm going to sand off all these little bits of glue, and I'm just going to sand along the edge here, make sure everything's nice and solid. It's really smooth. So what I need to do now is I need to set myself up with a fence across here, across the back. I need to make sure that's going to be square. In order to do that, what I'm going to do first is just put a piece across the front that's going to help hold everything together, and I'm going to put a piece across the back that's going to help hold everything together. Those aren't going to be the final fence. They're just going to be to secure everything, and then the fence is going to go in front so that it can be nice and true and square. I skipped a little bit. I put on the one fence and now I'm going to put on the other fence. Like I said, these are mostly just to hold everything together, and then there's going to be another piece that's going to actually make everything true. So what I'm going to do now is just glue this down. Paying particular attention to putting plenty of glue on my ends and in that center section, just because that's where most of the force is going to be. And once I get a nice coat on there, oops, I got a little high there, you couldn't really see. So once I get a nice coat on, then I'm going to clamp it down, flip it over, and screw everything down. That way everything will hold nice and tight. I put a couple of arrows on here. It's a little hard to see, but just to help myself stay oriented with which side I'm treating as the front and which side I'm treating as the back. The other thing to keep in mind, I'm using some recycled wood here for this. And whenever you're using any kind of recycled wood, you need to be really careful about anything like old nails and stuff like that. So I removed all the nails that I could get out, and I made sure that anything that is left isn't going to be anywhere near the blade. And there really isn't anything left, but I just went through and I was double checking all the holes and stuff, and anything I thought there might be something, I made sure that I kept it away from where the blade's going to be. So I'm going to drill some pilot holes now. I have about 6 on the one side. I'm going to do the same thing on the other side, just putting in 6 screws, countersunk. And I have a couple of little marks for the places where the blade could be. It's going to be in this area, so I want to avoid this area entirely. Depending on which way I flip this around and which way I'm using it, I don't want to take any chance of doing something creative and ending up messing things up. I think it's time for a new battery. One thing I've learned from working on a variety of different things, especially fixing anything on a car or stuff like that, is when you're screwing anything in, you need to alternate your screw locations. If you don't alternate your screw locations, you end up warping and twisting things sometimes. So I'm starting at the middle and then going to one outside, going to the other outside, kind of bringing it back and forth. All right, this is looking nice. Next step is to sand again, just to make sure that everything is smooth and flush. Anything that might be sticking out, get taken up. I don't want anything hitting anywhere. Let's see how she slides. Excellent. That slides really nicely. I have to be careful because it kind of wants to settle as I come off the one end to the other end. So I'm going to have to kind of get the hang of how to hold it, slide it, move it. So now I'm just going to cut through, give myself a nice little line right here, so that I know exactly where I'm cutting and it'll hold everything together. And that's going to be my line that I'm going to have to come off of at a perfect 90 so that I have everything true. So I have a rather straight and true board here, and that's going to become my actual fence. So first thing is to just put some glue on it to help hold it down once it's in place. And now that's glued up, I'm going to just put it on. I'm going to clamp it on one end, get it nice and tight, and I'm going to place my clamp on the other end so that it's in place, but it's got a lot of play. And then I'm going to line up with my saw, and as you can see, I'm a little off, so I'm actually going to need to come out on this side. I thought it was going to need to come out on this side. So I will clamp this down a little bit more, see how we are. Okay, it needs to come out a little bit. So I've got a couple of shims. I'm just going to come in with the shims, try to get things straight.
Just left a little bit in there.
Alright, that looks like it's going to be about right. Before I put any screws in, I'm going to let it sit, let the glue dry a little bit so that it'll hold it tightly before I start actually gluing it up, or before I start screwing it down. Once I screw it, or once I get ready to screw it, I'm going to, again, be here with the shims, square it up as much as I can, start with my screws, square it up, and just keep going like that. That way I can get it nice and straight. Because if I don't spend a good bit of time on this and getting this right now, I'm going to have a lot more problems with every single project later. So my glue has had time to set, and I've got things lined up. I started shimming a little bit, got a little bit of a gap, so I need to bring this end out a little bit. So I'm just kind of driving a shim in here. It's going to take a couple more, I think. Didn't like where that one was ending up. That's moving it. That's good. Okay, that's looking like it's a good start. I'm going to put my first screw in. For this kind of project, a quick change system would be good, but I don't do it often enough to really need that. Okay, that's a good start. I'll put another screw in at the other end. Then I'm going to keep shimming. Change my camera angle so you can see the whole piece. Alright, there we go. Now you can see a little better. Alright, let's see how we are with square. We are looking very square. That is good. Alright. I'm going to carefully keep screwing. That looks pretty solid. So it's time to clean up. cut a couple pieces and see how square we have it. So I'm just going to cut a couple pieces of MDF just to see how square we are. I've got it butted up against my fence. Got my saw blade at the right height. So let's see what we have. Nice cut. It's got a little rub there, so it got a little hot. Now, if everything is correct, as I go around, I should end up making this properly 90 degrees all the way around. Got my cut edge butted up against the fence. So that does not look square to me. It's definitely not square. Oh, that one is. That one is. That one is. That one is not. Okay. Let me try another one. See what I'm getting right and see what I'm getting wrong. I've got another piece of MDF. I think it might just be my start, maybe causing the problem. Okay, let's see what we've got. Nice and square. Nice and square. Okay, looks like we are good. It looks like I have successfully made a sled to be able to cut things a little bit safer. It's not ideal yet. What I'm going to do is come up with a system to be able to hold things down a little bit better than trying to reach my fingers over, because I just don't like having my fingers be that stretched out trying to get to things. But at the same time, I don't want my fingers close to the blade. And I'm going to make myself a little stop so that I don't go too far. Basically something that's going to stop me from extending beyond the end of the table saw itself. I don't want the blade coming all the way through, accidentally having my hands back here and having an accident. So I'm just going to make a stop, and then what I've seen a lot of people do is actually put a little bit of a little block of wood back here that won't cut through when the stop is in place, and that'll keep me safe. Well, thank you for joining me on the Peaceful Wood Turner. I really like your feedback. Let me know what you think of this table, this sled, and what else I can do for my next one to make a better one. Once I have the basic straight sled down, have a good one made up, then the next thing I'm going to do is make myself a wedgie sled. But this one's not quite perfect yet. It's there, but it's not there. So a little more work getting this one straight, and then I'll be able to work on something a little bit more involved. So thank you for joining me, and please let me know what you think in the comments below.